Okay, the Violent Femmes debut album is out as a special deluxe edition, 40th anniversary edition. It's available to buy now, if I'm not mistaken. There is a purchasing link just below this video. If I may, the first question I have for you is how important is CBGBs to the Violent Femmes story?
CBGBs does have a place in the Violent Femme story, but it's not quite an important one or heralded one. We did play there on one occasion, and besides that, I think Brian and I may have gone there a couple times. I know one time when I was in, uh, let's see, we were in Soho at
Mhm.
the Performing Garage when I was working as an actor with the Theater X company from Milwaukee. And I had gone to CBGB's one particular night with one of the technical guys that was with the theater, and we went down to see uh, the Dead Boys, and so I got to meet Cheetah Chrome outside, so that was fun.
Oh, excellent. Well done. Have you seen the film with Alan Rickman? And
No, I haven't yet. I want to see it. Is it a good film?
oh, it's a great film. That's a great film.
Oh, I'll check it out.
Yeah. Robert Palmer said the discursive and rambling structures of folk era Dylan is very much like the songs on this album. Would you agree with that?
Well, any comparison to Dylan is certainly something to be
Absolutely.
accepted. But it's funny because I've heard more comparisons to Lou Reed uh,
Okay.
as far as Gordon's material is concerned. But I certainly hear something in the singer-songwriter balladeering approach that Dylan has on some of his more epic pieces. Some of Gordon's work is akin to that, but I don't think he ever really set out to hold Dylan in such high esteem. I think his guy was also, was always Lou Reed. He was very much into Lou Reed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Lou Reed, well, I think he used to play CBGBs as well. Yeah, well, according to the
Right?
film anyway. But or at least he's in the movie anyway. I can't remember if he actually played there or not.
Well,
Um, Again, that's again another great quote for you. Pitchfork has described this album as an unfiltered take on alienation. Do you think, in some ways, this band, in some ways, prepared the ground for grunge?
oh, that's a great question. Well, we certainly tried to bridge all kinds of different musical genres. As far as what happened when the grunge scene came on, um, we weren't really too interested in that because as a group, the three of us were always much more interested in avant-garde jazz, real rural country music, and world musics. So something having to do with just an American genre of music didn't really interest us all that much. I think because of the time frame where we were coming up, we were sometimes lumped into that. But we always described ourselves as being more of a kind of a folk punk band.
Yeah, yeah. Well, were the Plasmatics an influence at all?
No, but Wendy O. Williams got her neck stepped on here in Milwaukee.
All right. I saw Wendy O. Williams many years ago. She was supporting Motorhead.
Ah,
My word, she could certainly scream. That's for sure. I remember that.
do you know that famous story about her in Milwaukee, though?
No, I don't. No.
Oh, yeah, she got arrested on stage
Yeah.
for nudity. And
Really?
there's a famous picture of her looking like a wild animal. She's laying on the ground, and a police officer's boot is right on her neck.
Right. I'll have to go and look that up, I think.
Yeah.
Um, I've got to ask you, what's a transophone and how does it influence the sound of the band?
The transaphone is a folk art instrument
Mhm.
that was created by myself and Brian Ritchie, the bass player in the band, and also a friend of ours named Jerry Fortier. Jerry Fortier also had a group called the Trance and Dance Band, and Brian played bass and I played percussion with that band for a certain amount of time. But one Saturday afternoon, we were in Jerry's attic where he had a little studio and he was working on a soundtrack for a film that he was putting together. So he was suggesting that we needed some kind of a percussion element in the soundtrack. So rather than just using a snare drum or a cymbal or a floor tom or what have you,
Mhm.
we just kind of gathered up some ingredients that were in the attic.
Okay.
What was there was a metal bushel basket. Then there was also a one-headed floor tom and some metal brushes.
Yeah.
So I took the metal bushel basket, put it on top of the floor tom, mounted that on a snare stand, and played it with metal brushes. Because when you played it with metal brushes, you would get some kind of a ping out of the metal bushel basket. But when you would hit the top, because of the one-headed floor tom underneath, you would get some kind of a thump. So
Okay.
between the two sounds, and also there was a rib top, so you could scrape on it too. So between those three elements, you had three different sounds.
All right. Okay. Um, the picture on the album cover has been described as an apt metaphor for the songs. To what extent would you agree?
Oh, you mean little Billie Jean looking through the window?
Well, this guy goes on to say that the moment childhood innocence is corrupted by an obsession with the adult world. Do you think they're just reading too much into it, maybe?
Oh no. Well, he might be, but in the same time, I like that he said that,
Yeah.
and it provides. I mean, I started in show business as an actor, so what I like is that conjures up some kind of a drama just by looking at that picture and with what he said.
It does,
I
yeah.
had thought of that and previously. I had thought about that about what is she looking at? What is she seeing? And just the way her body is splayed against that window too. There's just something really interesting in the action of what's happening in that photo.
It's a very dramatic photo. It's intriguing. You just sort of are curious as to what it is she said. I wonder it's not Joni. It was said the house was in Laurel Canyon apparently. Is that
I
right?
think so. I think that's where it was.
I'd say
Yes.
it's not Joni Mitchell's house, is it? Maybe she's gazing at Joni Mitchell and R.E.M. now.
No, no. Maybe she's watching David Crosby smoke some pot or something.
I think so. I think there's something mysterious going on there. Um,
Right.
but Billy Joe Campbell, I mean, how does she feel about being a music icon?
Boy, I don't know. I'd have to say I never spoke with her.
Hmm.
I didn't go to the photo shoot, and I knew her mother because her mother was going out with our manager for a while. But I never had a chance to meet Billy Joe in person.
Oh wow. Wow, she must be if the album's 40 years ago, she must be about 46, 47 now.
I would say at least, yes.
Yeah, I suppose she was. Is it true that there were a lot of gospel songs written for this album, but Ritchie refused to do them?
Well, I think a lot has been made about that. Brian did have some aversion to some of the religious material, but in the end, we still put it on our records because we wanted to be honest with ourselves. And that's the kind of material that Gordon also had in his canon, besides all the sex rock.
Yeah, yeah.
So we decided that we were going to feature everything that we had at our disposal. And something that is interesting, as far as I'm concerned, is that when we recorded that first album,
Hmm.
Gordon had this infamous notebook where he kept a lot of lyrics and a lot of chord structures and melodies.
Yeah.
And by the time we got to record that first album, we had a whole plethora of material available to us.
Yeah.
So a lot of the songs that ended up on that first album, some of those songs could have ended up on the second or third album,
Right.
and interchangeable, vice versa. So that's something that I always like to think about, and that most people don't realize is that we were fully formed before anybody really knew about us.
Right. Right. Um, how important is James Honeyman Scott of the Pretenders to this band and their story?
Oh,
Because we lost him he died very young, didn't he?
yes, he did, which is very unfortunate.
Mm.
I've had some communications with his widow over the years. In fact, she provided a picture for me a couple of years back of us backstage talking with Chrissy and the band, and I didn't even know that a picture existed.
Hmm.
But he was very instrumental in having us play because he was the first to hear us.
Yeah.
He came out of the theater, the Oriental Theater, where they were going to perform that night, the Pretenders, and he was coming out of the theater to go up to the corner where the Oriental drugstore was, and they had a sandwich counter there, and they had a fountain, soda fountain, and stuff like that. So he was going, I think, to get some lunch. And when he came back, he stopped and he was listening to us, and he goes, "You know, you guys sound like somebody that's getting popular in England now called the Stray Cats."
Okay.
And we said, "Oh, really? What are they like?" And he said, "Well, you know, they're more electric than you guys, but they have that same kind of quality, and it is a trio, and it's a lot more rough." Um, and so we said, "Oh, fantastic," because we had never heard of them.
Yeah.
So so anyway, we just kept on playing.
Yeah.
Our usual spot, one of our usual spots to busk, was under the marquee of the Oriental Theater because it had
Okay.
a real nice acoustic sound. So we just went back to playing, and a few people came by and threw some quarters into our guitar case and what have you. Next thing we know, the door to the theater opens again, and about five people come out, and they line up on the curb there, and they start leaning on a car, and they're listening to us. And so we're playing a few songs,
Mhm.
and we get to one song called Girl Trouble.
Okay.
And the refrain is, "Girl trouble, I've got girl trouble up the ass, up the ass, up the ass." And the woman who was standing there listening just started laughing crazily. And when we finished the song, she came over and she goes, "My God, you guys are fantastic. My name is Chris. Do you want to open for us tonight at the show?" And we said, "What do you mean open at the show?" And she said, "We're playing here tonight." And we said, "Oh, you're playing here?" "Yeah, we're the Pretenders." And we didn't know who the Pretenders were. We were
Yeah.
more apt to know who Ornette Coleman or Albert Ayler was.
Mhm.
So anyway, we said, "Sure, of course we'd like to play."
Mhm.
So we came and we played that night. They let us on, and we did three songs. And it's funny to this day when I run into people that say that they were at the show, they said, "Oh, when you came out, I was really clapping for you guys and I was really excited. But when we came out, there were a lot of boos
Yeah.
because everybody wanted to see the Pretenders. They didn't want to see these three, stupid farmers coming
Yeah.
up there playing this ridiculous music." So but all in all, it was just a great experience, and it's a wonderful story to relate. But the honest to God truth is, the next day we were back out on the street.
Yeah. I think support bands get have a hard time of it, really. I
Oh
remember
yeah.
when I was a teenager, I used to be a big Kiss fan, and I went to see them when I was about 16, I think it was, and they were supported by this unknown band from New Jersey called Bon Jovi, and everyone just ignored them. Just ignored
Yeah,
them. They must have made
yeah.
they must have made an impression on me because the next day I went out and bought their first album, so they must have
Oh
made
yeah,
an impression
yeah.
on me. But support bands, that's I think you're always in for a rough ride to a certain extent because people just want to see the main act, don't they?
Right, right. But I mean, sometimes you're pleasantly surprised, or other times the billing is shared, so you realize you're going to be listening to both bands. So,
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I'm saying this guy's name correctly. Is it Van Heck, the producer? Is that his
Van
name?
Hecky.
Hecky, beg your pardon.
Yes.
How did he come to produce this album? And in your opinion, did he come close to that classic Sun Studio sound?
Well, Mark was a good friend of mine from the theater world. We had worked together on film and theater soundtracks. Mark was employed as a composer at the Milwaukee Repertory Theater, and I was working as an actor with Theater X of Milwaukee and with the
Yeah.
Milwaukee Rep. So we had met via that connection. And I knew that Mark had a little four-track studio in the back of his apartment. So when it came time for the Femmes to want to do some kind of a demo,
Mhm.
because we were thinking that we could use that to try and hustle up some more shows for us, I asked Mark if it would be okay if we would come over and record in his little facility. And he said, "Sure." And he said, "Would you like me to lend a hand?" And I said, "Yeah, of course, we'd love to hear your opinions and all that." So he kind of became the de facto producer by accident. The real truth is that we produced the records together, but Mark's name was listed as producer. But that's how we met him, and then we just started um, trying to figure out a way to get some money together to go to a real studio
Yeah.
and make the album proper. Because that's one thing we wanted to do. We didn't want to make the record for a record company. We wanted to make it for ourselves and then sell it as a finished master.
Yeah, I think I read an interview. I read somewhere that he said he was trying to recreate that classic Sun Studio sound with your album. I don't know. Do you think he achieved that?
Well, no, because we didn't use a lot of slapback echo.
Uh-huh.
And also, if anything, I thought what we were doing was more akin to Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps.
Okay. Okay. The song. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about the song "Blister in the Sun." How did the composition of that one come about?
Well, Gordon just turned us on to that song one day at rehearsal, and it was automatic, the arrangement. One of the things about Violent Femmes is that Gordon, of course, is a songwriter, and he would come in with lyric, chord structure, and melodies. But the strength that Brian and I held was the power that we had as arrangers,
Right.
because Brian and I are both songwriters and we play multiple instruments as well.
Okay.
So we lent that into the stew. But Blister was just presented one day, and it was catchy.
Yeah.
We liked what he was saying in it because it seemed a little bit obscure, but there was certainly some ways that you could apply your own opinion about what he was talking about.
Right.
Uh, he contends that it's not about masturbation, but who knows? Anyway, so when he played the song, Brian and I felt, wouldn't it be nice if it had some kind of a fanfare,
Uh-huh.
something to cue you into the song, that you'd know it was that song right away without getting into the body of the first verse or
Yeah.
something. So he came up with that little fanfare, and then automatically I just added those two stutter flams after his little fanfare,
Right.
and right away we went, oh my God, that's it. Let's keep it.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm glad you did. I mean, there's another song on here as well that "Good Feeling." I mean,
Yeah.
was that written about anyone in particular?
I don't know if Gordon wrote that about anybody in particular, but that also reminds me of a Velvet Underground song called Jesus.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
it's both great songs, incidentally. Um,
Yeah,
my
one thing about Gordon that was nice playing with him was that he just had so much great material, and you realized it right off the bat. It wasn't something that had to be developed. It was just, okay, here it is. Let's make something of it. And that certainly held us in good stead for at least four records.
Yeah, you guys reformed though, didn't you? For the is it Coachella Festival, music festival?
Yes, in 2013, we played four shows together. There were two at Coachella, one at Bottle Rocket, and then we played at Summerfest here in Milwaukee.
How did that feel? Did that feel good?
It was okay. I was hoping that we could maybe go on more, but they had different ideas about what they wanted to do. And I'm happy with what I'm doing with my career and stuff. So,
Okay.
but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe sometime in the future we give it a go again.
Yeah, hopefully. I can't help but notice in the background, it looks as if there's a copy of Brian Wilson's Smile or the Beach Boys' Smile behind you.
Yes.
Um, uh, I've got to ask you actually, Pet Sounds as an album is an album that became very important retrospectively, as did the Kinks' We Are Village Green Preservation Society,
Yes.
very important retrospectively. You can probably guess where this question's going. Would you say the same is perhaps true of this record? It's a record that's perhaps more important retrospectively than when it first came out.
Oh, well, I know it's handed down from generation to generation, almost like a keepsake or some kind of a tchotchke that's
Well, it's funny,
important.
the artwork is so iconic that I know lots of people who know the album cover but don't actually know the album, unfortunately.
Right,
I always say they should give that album a good listen to. I think it's an
right.
important record.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Brian Wilson because I want to tell you just a really quick Brian Wilson story that I have for you that's
Oh,
interesting.
wow.
Um, for one thing, Brian Wilson is one of my absolute favorite musicians in the world,
Yeah.
and I'm so sorry that he just lost his wife.
Yeah. He's not
But
well at the moment either, is he?
pardon me?
he's not well at the moment either. He's just been, hasn't he got onset of dementia and something like that? He's been.
Yeah, and I think that's gonna probably speed it along too with his wife's passing.
Mm,
Anyway, one time I was down at the lakefront here where Summerfest, the biggest music festival in the world, is held every summer.
yeah.
And I was backstage because I was going to be sitting in with the Washington Squares that night. They were opening up for the Beach Boys. And this was the first night that the big main stage was going to be open. It
Yeah.
had just been finished. So I was backstage. I had just rehearsed with the Washington Squares, who
Mhm.
were some friends of mine, and I was working percussion with Billy Ficca from television, was playing the drum set.
Okay.
So we were friends and we were playing together. But anyway, I was waiting backstage for a ride, and all of a sudden I see a car pull up, and I'm looking at the car, and I see this guy get out, and I all of a sudden I realize, oh, that's Brian Wilson.
Right.
Must be here for sound check. So he starts walking up, comes up, and is walking right towards me. And I just said, "Hello, how are you doing this afternoon?" And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, I'm fine. How are you?" And I said, "I'm doing really well. Are you excited to be here?" And I didn't want to mention his name or let on that I knew him or
Mhm.
anything. I was just, trying to play it cool. And this particular place at Summerfest, this stage, looks out over Lake Michigan. So anyway, we're standing there in this awkward silence, and he's looking out over the water, and then he turns and he says to me, "What ocean is that?" And I said, "That's Lake Michigan." He
Right.
goes, "Oh, Lake Michigan. Okay, okay, I understand."
Mm.
And I said, "Well, uh, it's been nice speaking with you, Brian. I just wanted to tell you that every time I sit down behind a recording console, I say a prayer for you,
Mhm.
and you have done so much for music and for me personally, and I will thank you till the end of my days." And he just kind of looked at me like this, and then I just walked away.
Yeah. Well, it's a great story.
Yeah. What
Um,
kind of what lake? Excuse me. What ocean is that?
uh,
I'll never forget that. I didn't want to laugh in his face. It's like,
no,
oh,
no. I saw Brian Wilson a few years ago. He did the whole he did the whole of Pet Sounds.
yeah.
It was so much love and affection for him in that audience.
Oh
Incredible.
God.
I've
I
got to
saw
add,
I saw one of those tours too, and that was one of my dreams come true. And then when that box set of Smile came out, that was my other dream that came true.
well, it's funny. Al Jardine. One thing I took away from that concert, it was Al Jardine sounds as great now as he always did. I thought he sounded fantastic.
Oh yeah,
Could have
right.
gone. Could have been 1966. He sounded
Yeah.
brilliant. I thought.
And most people don't realize that he's a very good guitarist too.
Yeah, yeah.
Al Jardine. Yeah.
Interesting. What's your favorite version of Smile? Do you like the original recordings, or do you like the finished version that Brian put out? I think was it 2013. I can't remember the date. You,
Well, I think they both have value. Of course, I'm going to go for the bona fide real article,
yeah.
but it was nice that Brian took it upon himself, and he had some good people working with him that they could resurrect that and present it.
Mhm.
I thought that was wonderful, and I know probably going to pronounce his name wrong, but Jeff Foxett or something,
Yeah, something
who
like
was
that.
the musical director. I
Hmm.
know he just recently died too.
Okay.
So that's a couple shakeups in the Brian Wilson world.
Yeah, yeah. I have one last question for you. It's a question I ask everybody, really. Frank Zappa said, "Jazz isn't dead; it just smells funny." Um, how healthy then do you think the state of rock and roll is, given these days we've got bands miming, backing tracks, auto tune? How healthy do you think the body of rock and roll is?
Well, in my small bubble, I think it's doing wonderfully well because I'm so ensconced in classic music of all different kinds. I'm not so up on what's happening in modern day society.
Yeah, yeah.
That might be a fault of mine, but at the same time, I get so much education and so much satisfaction out of listening to the classics, and I'm always rediscovering albums and groups and solo artists that I've never even heard of. So it's a continuing education, but I probably should know more about what's happening today, but it seems like everything is really being guided now by the female voice, and a lot of female performers are I think a lot more recognizable in the world than male performers. I mean,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
to look at Taylor Swift, but I
yeah.
mean, there's so many other women besides her that
Mm.
that's what the music industry is for a lot of people now.
Well, a lot of very famous female artists have said that they are miming on stage. I think Britney Spears for one of them,
Yeah,
because they say they can't dance and sing. But then I always think, well, James Brown managed it, didn't he?
right. That's
Um,
true.
do you know what James Brown said of Elvis Presley? He said,
No, what did he say?
Elvis Presley, he's just a hillbilly that discovered the blues." Which I thought, great quote, great quote.
Did you ever get
Anyway,
to see James Brown?
oh, I wish I could have
I
seen
know that's one
James
person I
Brown.
never got to see, but I knew his drummer Clyde Stubblefield, and what a nice man. And I mean, I'm so fortunate in that I got to work with both Clyde Stubblefield and Hal Blaine, who are two of my real big drum influences.
Wow. Oh, excellent. I mean, James
Yeah, Hal
Brown,
Blaine played on a record of mine.
really?
Yeah,
What record was that?
there's a record I have out called Pancake Day, and
Okay.
he played on the single called Blind.
I get the impression James Brown was a probably a difficult man to work with. He used to find
That's what Clyde said.
he used to find the musicians on stage if they just miss it.
25.
Yeah, exactly. So if they
Yeah,
turned up with their shoes dirty, it was a fine.
right.
I bet he was a popular guy.
Yeah, right.
But no, I love James Brown. I really do. He's just fabulous. I never saw him live, but if I could see him, I would love to have seen him. Around about sort of 1965, 67, that
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
time to see James Brown.
yeah. On YouTube, they have these reruns of this American music show that was on in the 70s called Midnight Special.
Oh yeah,
And I watched a version of it last night where Sly and the Family Stone were the hosts.
yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, the band sounded incredible, but man, I don't know how Sly got through it. He was so fucked up. It was amazing. And he's right
Yeah.
on TV and he's just, whoa.
Well, I mean, interesting. Carlos Santana. He said he backstage at Woodstock, he made the mistake of accepting a drink or something with the Grateful Dead. Now the Grateful Dead laced everything, and he said he wondered how he got through his Woodstock set 'cause he was tripping like anything really. But I mean, the Grateful Dead famously spiked all the punch, didn't they, at the Playboy Mansion when they played there?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because we were a little bit wary. We opened for the Grateful Dead, if you can believe that.
Oh wow, what was that
Yeah,
like?
oh, it was fantastic because the two tour managers, our tour manager, uh, Willie knew the tour manager for the Grateful Dead, and somehow they cooked up this scheme that the Femmes could open for the Grateful Dead, which we thought was marvelous, but we didn't know how we would go over. But anyway, sure enough, they said, you guys can come and open up for us and play a half hour, and we'll see how it goes, and maybe we can do some other things in the future. So we came, and my God, it was in Darien Lakes in Ohio, I think it was. And they had this, literally, they set up a portable city in the middle of this big field.
Yeah.
So they had this massive stage. They had all this, like a sideshow where they were selling food and memorabilia and what have you. And we were there and we got to do a little bit of a sound check, not much. And then we were just waiting to go on. And in the meantime, Bruce Hornsby, who was playing piano with them, came up and said hello to us.
Yeah.
And he had heard of us and he said he was really excited to hear us. And I said, well, do you think the guys are going to like us? And he goes, "Oh yeah, I think they'll enjoy you guys, because they come from a folk music background and
They
stuff."
do,
So
yeah, 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 yeah.
so I said, "Okay, we'll see what happens." So we went on stage and we started playing. And right when we started playing, I noticed that all the Grateful Dead came out on the side of the stage and they were standing there
Really?
wanting to listen to us.
Yeah.
So we start playing, and there's 65,000 people out there,
Right.
right? Biggest crowd we ever played for, except for maybe Coachella was the same. But anyway, so we're playing, and we're watching the Grateful Dead, and we're watching the audience, and Grateful Dead they start getting into it. Then
Mhm.
the audience is getting into it. So when we got finished with our set, I mean, we were a hit. People really liked us. So we were hoping that maybe we'd get another chance to open for them again, but it didn't happen again.
You didn't accept any brownies from them or anything like
Well,
that.
that's what I'm saying. I was very I was very wary of eating or drinking anything backstage.
Well, the Grateful Dead, as you know, I mean, that when they play, they play for a long, long time.
Well, we heard them that night. Yeah.
Roger Daltrey said, back in the day, if you went on after the Grateful Dead, he said you never got on.
Yeah. Right. And
But
Daltrey, isn't he 80 today?
yeah, he's
Yeah.
knocking on a bit, but the Who are still
Yeah.
out there, are doing it.
Yeah.
But again, the Who, one of my favourite bands. I
Oh,
think
yes.
I think one of the finest live albums ever is the Who live at Leeds. It's
Yes. Yes. And
remarkable.
The Who Sell Out is one of my favorite concept albums of all time.
Well, that's just been released as a huge set, hasn't it?
I
Really?
saw that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I might have to pick that one up.
I managed to pick one up actually. It was really expensive when it came out, but the
Yeah.
price on Amazon dropped considerably to
Oh,
less
okay.
than half what it was just
Oh,
for Christmas. I bought one and then it shot back up a couple of days later. So
oh, okay.
I think we're kind of in times at the moment, certainly in the UK, where people just don't have the money to buy this sort of stuff now. So they're having to
Of
drop
course.
prices to get people to shift these units. I think, but
Yeah, I understand.
anyway, I could talk to you for hours, but
I know, Barry, we're getting on pretty well here.
well, anyone who loves Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys and the Grateful Dead has got to be okay.
Exactly.
I will
So,
ask you. Sorry, I will ask you. I mean, R.E.M. were quite a big band around your times. With you, did you have any interactions with them, touring or anything like that?
well, we had one interaction with them, which unfortunately wasn't that pleasant, in that they came to play what I mentioned before, that music festival here in Milwaukee called Summerfest.
Okay.
And so we heard that they were going to be here. So Brian and I got some champagne and we went down to meet them.
Hmm.
We were going to hopefully get to talk to them after their sound check or something. So after their sound check, they came off stage, went on their bus, and we went to the bus and knocked on the door and said, "Hey, we're Violent Femmes. We're from Milwaukee, and we'd like to meet the guys if that's okay." And we brought some champagne for them. So whoever this guy was, a roadie or tour manager, or whatever, he grabbed the champagne. He goes, "Oh, okay." He grabbed the champagne and went back on the bus, and then nobody ever came out.
Really? It's not very nice.
So REM.
It's interesting, I mean, I interviewed I can't remember his name, the guy from Gentle Giant, and I asked him because when they were the Simon Dupree and the Big Sound in the late '60s, they were on the same bill as the Beach Boys. So I had to ask him what it was like supporting the Beach Boys, and he quite bluntly said they were complete arseholes. You know,
Yeah.
he said, yeah, none of them were very nice guys. He said Al Jardine was okay, but the rest of them were just quite unpleasant. Although Brian wasn't by that time. This would have been what, '67. Brian wasn't touring with him by then,
He
was
was off the road by
he?
then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. Yeah, that was after. It was about after '64, wasn't he? He had that plane incident, and he didn't
Yeah.
tour with them anymore. Yes.
Well, didn't who was it? Was it Ben Vaughn had that song called "Kill Mike Love for Christmas"? I think the Ben Vaughn had some song called "Kill Mike Love for
Yeah. It,
Christmas."
it wasn't secretly written by Brian Wilson, was it?
I hope not.
Because Brian Wilson has been very vocal about his loathing of Mike Love.
Oh, well, it sounds like that was just between him and his dad. Oh my God, that poor guy.
I know
Yeah.
it's. I mean,
Oh.
It's funny you mentioned. I'm reading a biography of Brian Wilson at the moment. I've read a couple, and what his
Yeah.
dad put him through was just
Oh,
horrible stuff.
dude, I was just watching before I got on with you, Barry, a thing on YouTube called, oh, I put it off. Um, but it's some kind of a documentary about the Beach Boys,
Yeah,
but it was so well detailed. I mean, I know a lot about the Beach Boys, but I didn't realize a lot of this stuff they were telling me, especially about Murray Wilson and the horrible, horrible things that he would do to Brian that I never heard about any of these. I
yeah.
mean, such sadism and
Well, Brian
torture.
lost the hearing in one ear, didn't he? Because his father hit him.
Yeah, right.
But
And just doing stuff like one of the things that shocked me was I guess Murray had some minor hit with some song.
he did, yeah.
And this was when the Beach Boys were just forming. And apparently, Murray was upset or jealous that they were starting to get this band together.
Mhm.
So I guess one night after dinner, Murray comes out of his bedroom stark naked and goes on the kitchen table standing up and starts ranting, saying, I am the king of music in the Wilson family. I am the king. And I had never heard that story before.
Right, he sounds like he was unhinged,
Oh,
doesn't he? But
oh God.
well, I mean, of course, Brian Wilson fired him, didn't he? They actually fired him as um, he was the manager of the band, wasn't he, to start off with, I believe, and they sacked him really. But
Yeah, and he wanted to be the producer too.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sad. Poor Brian.
Anyway, I could chat for hours too, but I'll just plug this wonderful box set again.
Fabulous.
Violent Femmes 40th anniversary. This is the vinyl edition. This is, I believe, it's out actually now. I think,
Today's the day.
yeah, it's definitely out now. There is a purchasing link just below this video for you to check that out. Victor, thank you so much for your time, for your Beach Boy stories, and for agreeing to do this anyway.
Thank you very much, Barry. It's been a pleasure spending some time with you.
Okay, all the best, mate. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Bye bye.